Hello, y'all, and welcome to the 5th episode of the Anti-Filter podcast. We're going to be talking about some things this week, but here's the thing. I had a revelation that I wanted to share with you. Okay? And, listen, I don't know what's going to happen this week, what we're going to talk about, but we've got some stuff written down and we're just going to kind of go through it. Okay, here's the thing. So this morning, I don't know about you, but when it comes to my period, my friend was like, I think you have PMDD because why the fuck? I don't know. It's like premenstrual something disorder. I don't fucking know, bitch. All I know is that the week before my period, I want to kill myself more than I usually do. And that's not the vibe.
Get that.
Obviously. But then towards the end of my period, I'm at the end of my period now. It just finished yesterday. And I had a moment, and I've talked to my mom about this before specifically. And when I was little, my dad was cheap as shit. If we ever went to a hotel or something, he'd be ravenous and steal the fucking shit from the maid cart all the time. So when I was little, I remember vividly being in the bathroom at my dad's house and taking my towel and putting it on my body in certain ways. I know you're where the fuck is this going? And pretending, doing tutorials, and I'd take the random hotel moisturizer and pretend to do tutorials in the mirror with cream and shit. And I was thinking this morning that despite the fact that I'm fucking poor as shit, right? It's been almost a year to the date that I started, did my first grid post on Instagram on this account. And if younger me could see me now, just spending all day creating content, going to the gym, helping improve my relationship with food has improved so much, and my clients' relationships with food has improved so much. And I just read and create, and if younger me could see me now, she'd be so happy. But I have such a hard time remembering that in the dark moments with BPD, with depression. It doesn't fucking matter. There's no amount of thinking that can get you out of a thought pattern when you're that fucking dysregulated. But it just goes to show you, I don't know, I'm going off on a fucking tangent here. All I know is that 30 is lit. I was fuck, I don't want to turn 30. I don't want to turn 30. And now that I'm 30, I'm just no, 30 is lit.
I was going to say, I feel and I was just talking about this with someone else, when you're, I'm so sorry. I thought I saw a bug and I was about to throw everything against the wall. I'm still kind of is it a bug? But anyways, basically when you're kind of living more of your purpose, I feel it really helps alleviate a lot of the shit that goes along with BPD. Don't get me wrong. Most of the time, I am unhappy. I am angry. I am upset, overstimulated, don't want to be here. But I think I've just kind of given up in the state of understanding that that's just how my brain is wired. There's really no changing it. I really gotten to a point where she'd be yip yapping talking about kill yourself. And I'm fuck you. We got work, bitch. Put your shoes on. Time to go. So I think you just kind of, and I know that sounds really awful, but you really do after a certain point get desensitized to it. But when you're living in your purpose, it helps so much. And you truly are. You're doing
well, it's so funny because I'm sure that you experience this too, and it's something that I find that I connect with you really well on. I'm looking down at my foot, and 2 of my toes are hidden. It looks like I have only 3 toes, and it's so fucking weird. Anyway.
Okay, wait. Never mind.
I'm not going to show the feet. The feet is for passes only.
Because I was gonna say on your post today on was it called Pages? I was like, is she posting
Passes?
feet
Yeah, my
on
feet are on
Pages?
passes, bitch. Well, I'll say that and then I'll get back into what I was saying. But yeah, like I've been making a joke for 3 years now on Instagram about like no free feet. And I got like 3 emails in 1 week, like a month ago, from this guy at this company called Passes. It's basically like Patreon meets OnlyFans, but there's no nudity allowed. So basically, like, I know that so many guys jerk off to my fucking content, and I'll be posting like videos of me talking, but I'll be like in a bathing suit or something. And I tried Instagram subscriptions for a couple days, and every single thing that I post, like, I literally took a photo of myself just like in my fucking gym singlet. Like, I wasn't sexual at all, just me and my salad. And Instagram was like, flagged for bad behavior. And I was like, babe, you know what? I'm fucking over this. Like, I was listening to this song. I've listened to it. Like, I don't know if you're like this with autism, but it's called Labor by Paris Paloma. And I think it went viral a few years ago. And it's like all day, every day, therapist, mother, maid, nymph, and a virgin. Yes. And I experienced female rage to such a deep degree last night that I was like, you know what? Everybody is jerking off to my content. I message people constantly. I'm not getting paid for it. I can't pay my rent. And I had a moment yesterday where, when I was really young, I had OCD so bad. And for years, I was doing all these crazy ritualistic things because I genuinely thought my mother was going to die. And I had a moment yesterday where I was like crying, and I was like, there's no fucking way I'm going to be able to afford to move her back home. I need to do something. And I was just experiencing female rage. And I was like, fuck this. So I started it, and let's see what we're at. This was 24 hours, like less than 24 hours ago I started it, and I'm at $525.
Let me just say this. Let me just say this. I'm not gonna like say it in full on this podcast. I might get to that point. We're gonna text about this because long story short, there's like certain avenues that so and I think it's interesting to talk about this while also talking about mental health for men. I think it's like really like interesting to look at. But regardless, we're gonna dive deeper about this on our own because just
We'll get into mental health about men because I had a revelation the other day. But one thing I did want to go back to, this is like the most ADHD fucking podcast ever, is
I know.
I lost it. And that's on ADHD and forgetfulness. No, so it's becoming desensitized when it comes to BPD. So, like, I don't know about you, but like, I frequently have conversations with people where I'm just like, yeah, I wanted to like kill myself, you know, ha ha ha, he. And I am generally pretty good at like, it's like a gaydar, but for mentally ill people. I'm pretty good at like gauging who's also autistic. And generally speaking, like, I know that people who have dealt, like, who are autistic have felt suicidal many a time, myself included. I'm sure you have as well. And it's so funny that, like, I think that sometimes when neurotypical people have the tendency to open up to me about something like that, I'm not very serious about it. It's kind of the same as rape. It's just something that's like so ingrained in me on such a deep level that to me it's just not serious. Like, it is serious. Obviously, it's a serious subject, but it's something to me that's just my day-to-day life. Like, I've accepted it, and I deal with suicidal ideation constantly. Like, you know, I was in a psych ward back in 2019 because I had a plan to kill myself, and that's just how it is. Like, I've attempted so many times on my life. While I was a drug addict, I was trying to OD every single day. Like, I did overdose. And yeah, it's just like, it's so normalized to me that it's just not even a big deal anymore. It sucks, like, when you feel it. And the thing is they say that when you experience high dysregulation, the only way to get out of it is by expelling physical energy. And to me, usually if I'm feeling really suicidal, like obviously, like I go to the gym a lot and I'll go to the gym, but there's only so much that expelling physical energy can do. I think when you're in a serious bout of depression or you're experiencing a BPD, like a borderline low. And when you're in that phase, it doesn't matter. It literally just doesn't matter. Like, you can't think your way out of it. And it's just fucked. And it's very scary.
I think I agree. Like, I think something that I find very interesting is that growing up, so my mother is bipolar 2, schizophrenic, and severely has PTSD. It's really interesting to see like the stark contrast like between our mental illnesses. And what I mean by that is me and my mom are very estranged. And we'll probably get into that like on a whole different episode, but we are very estranged. Like I keep her at an arm's distance. And for good reason. I'll say that. But it's funny because like obviously with like BPD, like there's a lot of like highs and lows, if you will, but it's all on like a 24-hour like time basis. Like each day is like I wake up some days and I'm like, oh yeah, it's gonna be not a good day because I just know and can sense that like something so little is gonna throw me through a motherfucking loop. Or just some days I wake up and I'm like, honestly, I've been through so much fucking shit. What is the fucking point of a life? But then other times, right, like I wake up feeling like absolutely insane or like unhinged. Like my friends can always tell when I'm feeling manic because like I'm constantly joking. I'm constantly like making the most unhinged, wild like comments. And like for example, this week, every night I averaged 3 hours of sleep. Like last night was the first night that I got 6 hours of sleep. Why? I don't fucking know. Could be stress. Could be I'm switching into a manic because I was kind of in like a slight low. But with my mom, on the other hand, she's someone who's like she can be in a low for like weeks at a time. And something that she doesn't experience that we experience is that like overwhelming of emotions. Like sure, when she's depressed, she's overwhelmed, or when she's manic, she's kind of overwhelmed by like impulse, but she doesn't have like the desensitization to it because it's so long periods that it's kind of new every single time she experiences it. While I flip flop around 360, 180, left, right, up, down, everywhere all day. So it's like, I mean, I just kind of roll with the punches at that point. Like, you know what I'm saying? And like, don't get me wrong, I definitely have my moments. And it's really like upsetting when it's like, oh my God, I'm in full tears and nothing's wrong. Like nothing has happened. Cause sometimes too, like I wake up overstimulated and then all this shit goes wrong and I'm upset and then I'm like, I want to die. But then other days it's like everything goes right and I'm still like, fuck this shit. And so I think, I don't know, like when you get older with BPD, right? Like I just feel like you flip flopped around so many times and so like many different ways that you're just like, yeah, bitch, okay. Like I get it. I hear you, but like we're just gonna go do this right now. And I don't know, don't get me wrong, like I feel like I can say that now because I myself am in like a higher vibration, if you will. And I've noticed that about me too. Like I'll if I'm in a low, like the mindset is completely different versus if I'm having like a manic or like a really good day. Like I'm like, oh my God, like of course, like 2 decades of trauma, it's okay. I can relate to everybody. I'm here to help the universe. But then if I'm in a low, I'm like, honestly, like, fuck it. I could die tomorrow and like nobody would give a shit.
You know what, though? I say this all the time. I love Mania. I welcome her with open arms. When
Bitch, the God complex that
No, like when I
awakens
am
in
manic,
me.
I'm literally just like, I am the hottest person to have ever existed on this planet. I literally, genuinely am so mentally ill when I'm manic that I think that I could pull anyone ever, except for Timothy Chalamet. That's it, only because I'm taller. But literally, like when I get in BPD God mode,
Okay, but like honestly, like, okay, this sounds terrible, but I was explaining to my ex, again, another conversation for another time, but inherent to today's episode. But I was having a conversation with him, and I was like, honestly, like, I was like, it's really sad that you've like, cause so let me preface it with this. I am BPD, but I have a slew of other shit that likes to kind of like almost like flip flop. And what I mean by that is I am BPD. So I do have that very like anxious attachment, the fear of abandonment. But girl, I'm also avoidant personality disorder. So like object permanence, emotional permanence. I know you're talking about that on your page recently. If you are like not putting, like if you are not in my
You don't
life,
exist.
bye.
Don't remember
Bye.
you.
Bye. But I was telling my ex, I was like, he's way more avoidant, right? Like super avoidant, just completely kind of like out of touch and shut down. And I was like, this is the one thing about BPD that does it suck having? Yes. But I've never experienced what it's like to live life on a normal spectrum of emotions. Like, not saying that, like, for a week and a month wanting to be like, I want to die every day is worth like the euphoria moments. But like, could you like? I mean, that shit like is low key like a drug.
Literally are just licking me, and the mic is gonna catch it. Look at this man. He's like a pig. I love him.
Does the
No,
licking
the licking
overstimulate
calms me
you?
down.
Because it gets me some. Like if they keep
No,
going,
I love it.
really, it gets me. Like
They,
it gets me so bad.
if you're listening on Spotify or Apple
I don't know what
Podcasts,
it
we're
is.
talking about the dogs because Norman is and Pork Chop are very much present.
Oh God, could you imagine just being like, does the licking bother you? And like nobody can see what's
No,
happening.
the dogs really dysregulate me, but I do love them. And when I had that moment yesterday where I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? My mom's going to die. Like, she's my favorite person. And that's why I started doing content, is because I wanted to figure out enough, like a way to make enough money so I could buy her a home and move her home. Like, I want to build a house for us. I wanted to have separate entrances, separate kitchens, like two separate places, but I want her to be here. And no,
Is your
she
mom
lives in
sick?
Ecuador. She's like almost 70. She's gonna be,
Okay,
yeah. So
I knew that.
she's not sick. I just like,
Okay,
I love her and I miss her and I want her in my life. And that's kind of why I'm doing this. But I had a moment where I was like, oh my God, like, what if she, not my tit, um, coming out. I was like, what the fuck? Like, I was trying to figure out, I'm like, what would the only time that I feel like my sobriety would really be in jeopardy is if she passed. And I was like, what if she passes while she's still living in Ecuador? Like, what if I don't get the chance? And then I thought of my dogs because I was trying to think of people, that I would surround myself with to make it better. And I can genuinely say that I don't think that there's anybody like in my life. No hate to the people in my life. I just don't think that anyone could make me feel better for that. And I think that luckily, like, I've got these little demonic creatures that I hate, but I love them so much because they do dysregulate the fuck out of me. But I just love them so deeply. And I think that, I don't know, they would help. Like, they help my mental health. I think that there's a girl that I follow. You follow her too. Her name's Bristol Dempsey. And she started a
oh yeah,
podcast, and I didn't listen to it,
yeah.
but I heard a clip of her talking about her animals and mental health. And she, I think, like, in the clip was basically saying, like, okay, like, thank God for my fucking dogs and my cats, because if it weren't for them, like, I would have killed myself. Because when you have animals, you're forced to take care of them. Like, you have to stay alive. You can't, you have to. And as much as, like, when I go on walks, they bark, they're aggressive. Norman has childhood trauma. uh, but like, as much as they're like little cunts, like, I love them so dearly, and I think that they would be the only people that would keep me from probably like relapsing. but my mental health would be bad if my mom died. Like, I don't know what I'd do. But speaking of mental health, okay, this is something that I wanted to discuss with you because I actually had a revelation this week. It is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, okay? And someone from my old gym messaged me because sometimes what I'll do with social media is if my numbers are slowing down, I'll repost a viral video. I do it all the time. It always works. I don't really understand it, but whatever. Like, it is what it is. So there was an out of context YouTube clip that I reposted, and it was with Alex and I, and Alex was at the gym, and I was saying like as a joke, I was being like, hey, like, if you don't have test levels of 900 or higher, don't fucking approach me. And it was a joke. And then Alex was like, she has standards. And this guy, Liam, from my old gym, messaged me. He was like, hey, like, I just want you to know, like, this isn't cool. 1, 2, it doesn't help that it's Men's Mental Health Month. 3, like, people don't know you, so they don't, like, if they see this because it's out of context, like, they might get the wrong idea. And I said to him, I don't get it. Like, the problem with me is if I don't understand where I've gone wrong, I just, like, I'll be like, I don't understand where, like, I'll be like, I don't get where I'm wrong. Can you please explain this to me? Because, like, I want to understand. And it really bugged me for like an hour. I was heading to the gym and he was like, that's not cool. And I didn't get it, right? I was like, what the fuck? And I was driving to the gym. And as soon as I arrived at the gym, I started making a video. And in the video, because I was thinking, right, the thing with mental health issues with men, right? Because I was like, okay, is there a Women's Mental Health Month? And no, there's a Women's Mental Health Week. And I was thinking about feminism. And to my very like small knowledge of it, of like the whole fundamental basis of feminism, is that women wanted equality. They didn't want to be better than men, but they wanted equality. And I'm thinking, if women want equality on a fundamental level, and that's the whole purpose of feminism, is it women who are worsening men's mental health and making them feel like they can't talk about their feelings? Or is it a system that men put in place and they make each other feel like they actually can't talk about their feelings? Because with me, I'm going to just like, I need to rant for another like minute or two about this, and then I'd love to hear your perspective. But for me, and I don't know if you're like this too with autism, I don't know if it's the autism, but I forget that everybody else doesn't operate the way that I operate. So I assume that like, because I operate in a specific way, everybody else does as well. So because I feel like, to me, obviously men can talk about their mental health issues. Like, I've never been like, ew, that's disgusting, you're so weak. Like, why are you doing this? I just assume that that's everybody else's reaction, but apparently that's not the case. And he kind of like explained it to me. And my first reaction was like, oh, like, and then I thought, oh, here I am, somebody who is, and I'm not afraid to like say where I've gone wrong because I learn, I'm a person who's growing. But I thought, here I am, like, what he's talking to me about how he feels about Men's Mental Health Month. And then I thought, you know what? I'm somebody who talks a lot online about mental health. I consider myself, to a degree, a little bit, I guess, to be a mental health advocate. And here someone is telling me how they feel about men's mental health. And I didn't understand it. And like, my first thought was like, oh, well, we're going to discredit this because it's a system that men set up and they put in place. But am I helping? Like, no, like, I need to. So I took it down. I apologized. I said, thank you so much for letting me know. Like, I just didn't get it. And now I do. But just because it's a system that men built and they put in place and they make each other that's how I feel, feel like they can't talk about their own mental health issues, doesn't mean that it's a system that I need to uphold. And just because I don't think that men can't talk about their feelings doesn't mean that there aren't some women who don't hold those ideals. But it's tricky. Like, it's not and it is. I don't know. I think that it's important. I think that somebody who in this industry, specifically fitness, who does a beautiful job, like it's bringing me to tears just thinking about it, talking about men's mental health, is Christopher Bumstead. Like C-Bum, I love the shit out of him. He's not afraid to be vulnerable, and he makes other men feel like they can talk about their feelings, which is like very opposite of somebody who's like kind of like Andrew Tate ideals. And I love that he's inspiring kind of like young men to be emotional and be vulnerable, because it makes them feel like they're allowed. But then again, the system that they kind of built.
Is that your rant? Can I go now? Okay. So this topic is actually very interesting to me. When you text, I'm not gonna lie, just a little bit of like perspective. You texted me and you're like, we're gonna do a video on men's mental health, and I was like, girl, I'm gonna get so fucking canceled, and my career has not even started. I was like, because let me give some backstory. Like, I truly, at the end of the day, like the feminism to misandrist pipeline is fucking real. And when I
I
say
googled that when you
misandrist,
texted it to me. So
I
tell the
mean
people
it.
what it means.
So a misandrist basically means that like you really do have like a hate for men, like uh, and I will up front just like openly admit, like it is truly from a place of how much abuse I have suffered at the hands of men. But I will say this too. I I'm going to just hold off on that and I'll explain my perspective. So, I obviously have a background in preclinical public health, specifically working in clinical research. And I worked in like biology, anatomy, kinesiology, immunology. But one of the things that we like often discuss is mental health, because it's extremely important. And I will 1,000% agree with you that the main reason that men's mental health is suffering, and that there's currently, sorry, my neighbors are being absolutely loud, and why it's currently a topic of discussion is because the patriarchy, or the system that you refer to that's been built by men, is now really causing them to suffer. And we can dive all the way deep into this, but the patriarchy originally was set to make men feel superior and make them like the head of household and things like that. But now in today's day and age, I mean, let's keep it a stack. Our generation is overeducated, underpaid. They don't have the resources that they need. And there's no fathomable way that any man at this point in society, at least in America, can be a fully on his own, like the provider financially.
So you're saying basically
It
that the
is getting
system
to a
that
point
we're
where
in
it is
right now,
physically
because
impossible.
of inflation and because of how little we're getting paid and how much work we're doing, that is impacting men's mental health, because they are thought of as they need to be providers and they can no longer be.
They can't. Correct. That's part of the issue, right? Because especially too now, women have found our independence. I mean, we work for ourselves. We find our, like, we can vote. We can do all the same things that do all the same things that men can. Okay. I mean, on the surface, it's there. Dive into it, it's not. And something that I actually find very interesting is there's a comedian that I love, and I'm probably going to butcher her name, but I fucking adore her. She's a little bit more moderate. I would consider myself typically to be a little bit more liberal, but she's definitely more moderate. And she was like a women's gender studies major, and her whole comedy
Is
skits
it?
are
Is
completely about gender.
yes,
And her name is Eliza
yes. She
Eliza
gets
Schlesinger.
the
Yes,
goat
I
thing. She's like
fucking love her.
like the goat thing. Yeah.
Yeah, Party Goblin. Like, I fucking love her. When I tell you, I found her years ago, and like I put everyone onto her. And one of the things that she, like one of the skits that she does that I always reference, right, is this whole skit about how at the end of the day, the gap between men and women will always boil down to a physical level because men are quote unquote physically stronger, right? And she made the argument that if women had physical strength, that back in like, 1800s, if, you've got bodybuilder like Sandra over here and a tiny pipsqueak man tells her you can't vote, she's gonna like kick him to the side and just be like, I'm going to the polls, Jedediah. And I think really like it's one of the reasons why I'm kind of going on a whole tangent, but I think that's one of the reasons why men get very upset about women and femininity in the gym. I'm sorry. I've worked hard for these motherfucking glutes. I'm 100 pounds down at least, and at least 35 pounds up in muscle. I'm going to show these motherfucking glutes, and I'm going to make sure you know you can't fucking touch them. But regardless, I think the reality of it is that, yes, you're right. Like it is men suffering for the patriarchy. But, and I am a misandrist, I will give you that. Where I bring in the sympathy is that you can kind of make the same reflection in race. I am a white woman, and I did not perpetuate racism or continue slavery. But I know that the society that I'm living in continues to perpetuate oppression, racism, and people are severely affected by that. So what I mean by that is that basically, no, it is not like, yes, the patriarchy was created by men and they're suffering, but it was created by men centuries ago. And I think that these conversations are really important because unfortunately, and I think this is why men, this, if you're listening, I want you to really listen to this. One of the reasons why women are so frustrated is because for centuries and years, you have used us as your healing grounds, as your emotional support, as your only emotional support. And now you're getting to a point where now you don't know how to support yourself emotionally with your friends. You don't know how to talk to your friends. And now you can't even support yourself financially on your own. Men are getting to a point where they're having issues with their mental health because society is not aligned with the patriarchy anymore. Yet it's still being pushed in us. And I was actually talking with someone that I've actually met through my commercial gym that I work at. And his name is Seth, and he was working at this nutrition store, and I so desperately actually wanted him to be here for this. Because as far as like local content creator, he is one of my favorite content creators when it comes to men's mental health. He is so vulnerable about what he's been through. He's got a apparel company called Undefeated Apparel. Yes, Undefeated Apparel. He is absolutely amazing. And the short conversation that I had with him, it it really like kind of like opens my eyes to the fact that there are men out there struggling, but who are putting in the work for themselves. Because I think where women get frustrated is that we see men being like, men's mental health and y'all don't do shit but help us. I recently saw a trend that was like women or tree. And I was like, bitch, you're gonna sit here and be like basically saying that like I communicated to a woman how I felt and she laughed at me and made me feel worse. I'd rather talk to a tree in response to the man versus bear. And I was like, hear me the fuck out. You can talk to a tree. Hear me the fuck out, literally. You're asking me to be a fucking wall to listen to you? No, we can have a conversation. But anyways, I'm getting on a whole tangent. But anyways, there are men out there who do talk about mental health and are a great source for other men. But I think where we're at a point in society is, yes, I think as women we should be supportive of those conversations, but it's
It's
not
not, but you know
fucking
what?
job
I think
anymore.
that when it comes to it's funny that you brought race into it because the thing is there you only know what you know, right? So having these conversations is really important because it helps educate people. And I have like a couple of examples of that, of instances where I'm not afraid to admit where I was really wrong when it came to not being educated and I guess falling victim to my interpretation of events based off of mainstream media. So two things. So one of them is back in 2014 or 2015. Basically, where I did not understand what feminism was. I did no research. And at the time, I was actually in a relationship with someone who was raping me, but I didn't realize it. My teacher had developed a really close relationship with me, a woman, and she admitted to me that she was raped. And my first response was, well, what were you wearing? Yeah. I'm, I'm not afraid to admit that, because the thing is I did no research and I didn't understand, right? And it makes me sad, because, it's just victim blaming, but that's always what we hear, right? At least before, when we hear, well, someone's been raped, your first response is, well, what were you wearing? And I just love and appreciate her so much, because she was so kind in that moment. And she knew that I didn't know any better. And she responded with kindness. And she said, it's actually not about that. It's not. And she explained to me kind of what it was about. And it's funny, because how can I be victim blaming at the same time as being raped repeatedly for months? It's interesting. But, another prime example of people don't know what they don't know, when it comes to disability advocacy, I create videos and I talk about being disabled a lot, because I'm just learning that I am. I didn't know, and people with autism are disabled. Like, it's really hard. But a perfect example of an instance where I was not well informed. There's a difference between not being well informed and voicing your opinion, or not being well informed, knowing that you're not well informed, and then doing the work to understand why you have the thoughts that you have. And when I was in school for graphic design, there was someone in my program, and she had a mobility aid. She had a wheelchair. And I remember her getting up and walking. And I was like, girl, what are you doing there? Like, you don't need a wheelchair. You can walk. But that's because I didn't know any better. I didn't know anything about disabilities. I didn't understand that, like, mobility aids are valid, and, like, there's nothing wrong. Like, some people are able to stand. Does it mean that they can walk long distances? No. And the problem is that you don't know what you don't know. So the reason why I had this kind of light turn on when this guy had said to me, like, here's where you're wrong, is because I love my content, because, yeah, I post some thirst trap shit sometimes, but I like to get the people talking, and I will post hate comments and shit, because it forces people to hear other people's perspectives who are defensive, and then other people who, come into it, because I get a lot of comments where people are being like, you're retarded, you're not disabled, blah, 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 whatever. And I think that it's important that people see hate comments as well, because they need to understand what people who are autistic or who are disabled, who are mentally ill, go through, because it's hard. And while I don't know what it's like to be a man, I think that there's no comparison between the struggles of men versus women. And I think that if you cannot talk to your friends about how you feel, then it's your job to surround yourself with better friends. Because if you can't talk about how you feel, that's on you, dude. Like, I'm not saying that the system is easy, but life is not easy. And it's interesting, because I actually have a neighbor who I didn't talk to for a year, because I felt like he was a misogynist. And I don't even know where I was going with that. I completely forgot what I was talking about. Oh, here's what it was. We were having a conversation, and he said that it's harder to be a man than it is to be a woman. And I was like, how so? And he was like, men can't talk about their feelings. And I just felt so much rage, because I'm like, let's just take the fucking wage gap out of equation. Let's just take the fact that women are just not seen as equal. Let's just take the fact that we're seen as objects. Let's not even talk about rape and sexual assault. Let's just talk about periods. Imagine how hard it would be if your fucking dick was if you were bleeding out of the tip of your fucking dick once a month. You could barely afford to live. Now you have to fucking buy tampons. And on top of that, the ups and downs of hormonal changes, because I think that men run on like a 24-hour cycle. Women do not. Women do not. And you know what? I get maybe 3 good days a month when I'm ovulating. And bitch, if I'm sick or I'm BPD or I'm just not aligned with that, like there are a few good days I get per month as a fucking mentally ill, fucking neurodivergent, fucking disabled autistic, fucking PMDD, like CPTSD baddie. Like, shut the fuck up. Like, I literally get no days off, and I'm sorry that you can't provide. But the thing is that we're at a point where we as women are realizing, okay, that if I can cook, if I can clean, if I can work, if I can pay my own bills, and if I can make myself come, the fuck are you gonna do? I'm sorry. If you are not going to add to my life, and to me, this is where I find that I have a divide between me and most of the women in my life. And I think it's because I was raised by my mom who's hyper independent. But when, like, when it comes to dating, if I'm going on a date, like, I don't let men pay for me. I don't. And I think it's for a couple reasons, mainly because I don't want to feel like I owe them something. I don't want to get to the end of the date and they're like, well, where's my kiss? Are you going to suck my dick? Because it's like, no, sorry. Like, you bought a dinner and you think I'm going to suck your dick? Absolutely fucking not, bitch. But like, I'm so hyper independent, and I think it's because she was a family law lawyer, that to me, my idea of marriage, like even as a child, I've always said that if I do get married, probably not going to, I'm going to get a prenup because I'm going to be the more successful one, and I want to protect my motherfucking assets. But like, ain't no way. I know so many people that have gotten into marriages, that have had babies, that have stopped working, and they're completely dependent on their partner. And I don't ever want that to be me. It's been me, and I don't ever want that. Like, I don't want to ever feel like I have to stay in a relationship that is so toxic because I actually cannot afford to leave.
Yeah, no, and I think there's like a lot of points that you made that like I think are really important to touch on, and like I think that like where women are at in society right now is like we're experiencing a lot of rage, because for a very long time, like I said, we were this emotional breeding ground for men. They only got their emotional like stimulation from us. They get their venting from us. They can't rely on each other, so they use that for us. And for years we had to like deal with it to survive, right? Like we had to put up with the abuse, we had to put up with the cheating, we had to put up with bearing their fucking kids even if we didn't want them, because we could not work. I mean, women, I know in the US, I mean, we didn't get bank accounts or be able to have bank accounts until like the 50s, 60s, and that's being generous. So we had to rely on them for survival. And I think it's funny because being a misandrist, so basically having this kind of like internal, almost like hatred's not the right term. My respect with men is merit based. And I will say too, while I think the conversation of sexual assault and stuff is important, I think it's about time that men start opening up about their sexual assault. Because the reality of it is I think a lot of men struggle mentally due to sexual assault and yet cannot find comfort in it, or like comfort in like other people, other women who have experienced it, or just a community, because the expectation is that men always want it. And I will say up front, I myself have been sexually
Yeah.
assaulted by some of my closest friends,
Well,
and they were women.
it's hard because I think for us,
So
it's so deeply ingrained in us, right? And when I was talking about the neighbor, he did open up to me about being assaulted sexually. And, you know,
most men are. Like I'm gonna be upfront. A lot of the men that I have dealt with who have had extreme mental issues and have put me through a lot of pain were very open about someone sexually assaulting them. Specifically someone, I mean women, but like also like I know some of the worst cases where it was family members, right?
to us as women
Yeah.
in North America, I think that we have become so desensitized to sexual assault, to rape, that I find that something that I need to work on more is when a man is telling me about their experiences. Yeah, I think that I'm very like
Uh-huh.
nonchalant about it, because when I talk about my own rape, I'm very nonchalant about it and I don't expect any specific response. I just like, I'm like, wow, I'm really sorry that happened to you. That's so fucked up. And I've done my best to validate men, when they talk about that thing. But again, it's just so ingrained in me that it's just a part of me. So I think that something that I need to work on, and it is something that I've worked on, because when the neighbor did tell me that he brought up later on that he didn't think that I reacted with enough, I guess, like, not appropriately, but like I wasn't as empathetic as I could have been. And I realized that that's when I was so desensitized to it. So in the past, more recently, I found that I've been better when men have, brought that up and talked to me about it. And I have been more validating. But it's also hard because it's true. Like, they do have a history. People in general, I'm not just saying men, like people in general have a history of inflicting so much trauma and then not getting help themselves. And it's like, I have to go to therapy because your son raped me so much. Like, why aren't they footing the bill? Why aren't they getting help for being rapists? I wish I fucking knew. But it's hard for everybody. Like, mental health is not just a men's issue. It's not just a women's issue. It's a fucking issue for everybody.
Well, and I was going to say, like, so something that I wanted to talk about, right? So, like I said, I have the background in public health, which is a umbrella term that nobody understands for a degree in behavior change
Okay.
for health related outcomes. So, changing whatever behaviors you currently have for better health related outcomes.
Yeah.
Obviously, personal training can fall into that, um, like stopping smoking, HIV and STD prevention. But something that we talked about a lot was the fact that men are often very undiagnosed for mental illness, and they're actually the population that is most likely to kill themselves. While we see women being the most diagnosed population and being the ones most likely to not kill themselves. Not saying that women don't, but men are most likely to make impulsive decisions. They're typically more likely to kill themselves. So sorry, trigger warning, extreme trigger warning for this, because I wrote papers on this, and did research on it. But men are most likely to kill themselves in like
Yeah.
very physically harmful ways,
Yeah.
specifically firearms and such, while women are more
Yeah.
likely to do like pill overdoses. And shooting yourself has about an 85% chance of like death mortality rate, while overdosing has like 11 to 15% chance. So I think too, right? And like, again, not to bring race up into this, but uh, where I live, it's very important. And if I know you know this, but I know there's a lot of people that probably don't know this. I am someone who typically dates outside of my race. Um, Not saying that that's a like something that's a preference or anything like that, but in my last couple of relationships, I have dated someone who does not look like me. And so race to me is a very important conversation. And so when you look at like men as a group, like mental health is disproportionately affected based off race as well.
My ex, while he was white, a lot of his family members were Haitian. And dude, mental health in those households, oh, it doesn't fucking exist. It does not exist.
Not to like no, yeah, like not to get on this tangent, but something that you brought up earlier in our conversation, right? So I know we've touched kind of a little bit on like what I've been through, but like your girl has been through so fucking much. And men's mental health, right? That's what we're talking about. So obviously, typically with men's mental health, we're going to bring up NPD or narcissistic personality disorder. We're going to bring up abusive men. We're going to bring up rapists. but I really would love to take a moment to highlight the men who would be considered like the men who wear their that's okay. The men who wear their heart on their sleeves, right? Because hurt people hurt people. So my assumption is that at some point all of these men are kind of clean slate. They do their hardest to be good to their girlfriend or whoever, but then they get hurt on repeat and then they kind of shut down, turn off, turn avoidant, turn emotionally unavailable, and turn into this kind of like monster, right? So I know earlier you mentioned that like it would be like the end of the world
Yeah.
for you if your mother passed away. And obviously my father passed away in 2019. My dad was 10 out of 10, like a lover boy. I've never met a July Cancer with green flags like this man. I cannot express to you the love that he had for me and my mother, but like the extent that he went through. And my mom really took advantage of that. I watched my mom suck this man dry despite being divorced since I was 3. And so I have seen on the back end how men who have really good hearts can also get very, very hurt. And my dad like had no bad bone in his body, but he allowed my mother to take advantage of him so much to a point that I suffered for it. And so I think it's very important to bring up men's mental health simply because my dad's mental health was so bad that he didn't care about his physical health. And my dad was very neglective. Like he didn't really like emotionally put into my life until he was on his deathbed when I was 16. And he was like, holy shit, you're 16. I don't know your fucking favorite color. Your mom is obviously very abusive and like I need to do better. Um, and so I think something that's very common among men is that they don't change until they're ready. My dad moved through his cancer diagnosis and he was able to survive 4 years, which was unheard of with the strain, I guess, that he had. Um, and then I found my dad like unresponsive due to a multi-cluster stroke, kind of around like Christmas holiday, my second year or third year of college. So something that I think is really important is like my dad never asked for help, never got help, and probably desperately really needed it. And so I don't want to discredit, despite being a misandrist, despite being so done wrong by men, I don't want to discredit the fact that a lot of these men are hurting too, simply because they cannot find that emotional like space in their other men. And then they get done wrong one too many times by women. And this was like very apparent in my ex. He was considered like a serial monogamist and then moved into polyamory and polygamy because of how like wrong he was done. But even like in all of that, he still has this like serial monogamous like route about him, if you will, or like tendencies. And he also lost his mom kind of around like the same time I lost my dad, and we had very similar like backgrounds. There's like no like as a misandrist, it's very shocking that I'm about to admit that like I'm about to like what I'm about to admit, but I truly have an unsurmountable love for that person, like for that man. And but it's not to discredit the fact that he needs to do the work and needs to do the healing. And kind of how I've been backing off, like a lot of men will only do the healing when they're in a relationship, in a sneaky link, in a situationship. And I think it's just time that men really take their own initiative in having those conversations with each other. Because I'll tell you right now, as women, if you can't tell, we do have those conversations. You know, sometimes it's joking and being like, haha,
Yeah.
wanted to kill myself today, bitch. But we have those conversations and it's y'all need it. As a man, y'all need to start opening up to each other. It's not lame. It's not too emotional. It's not feminine. Do it.
I think also what it's going to do is it's going to give them room to grow in their relationships, because honestly, if you are on the receiving end as someone who has been the dealer of just constant mental health issues, it's very draining and very exhausting for somebody to just receive all of that. And, this comes back to something that I think about quite frequently, specifically with my dad. Like, I don't have a relationship with my dad. And, I thought about this with my ex as well, because my ex was very emotionally abusive. And I didn't, at first, I didn't recognize the abuse. It's very narcissistic, it's very hidden. And as time progressed and moved on, I kept giving him excuses. Like, his mom died. He watched his mom die. Like, literally, we were in a hospital and we saw her die. She died in front of us. Like, she had cancer. It was the height of COVID. June 28th, 2020, we were in the hospital, and this was the third time that we visited her. They finally allowed us to visit her. She was jaundiced. She was, and we were just, she knew it was time to let go. And I looked at her and she was like slack jaw. And I was like, I don't think she's breathing. They got the doctors, and she died right in front of us. And he had never known anybody who had died. And he ended up like cheating on me a couple days later, whatever. To which I consoled him, but it kind of, he didn't have the best childhood. Neither did I. I don't think a lot of people do, but I was constantly making excuses for him. Like, his mom died or he had a bad childhood. And I think the thing that is really important is having trauma can help you understand why a person is the way that they are, but it's your job to deal with your own shit. It is your job. And yeah, like, there's no excuse. We have so much information available. I'm just saying, no, I just need to say this because it's like we're at a time in our lives, right, where we have access to the internet. It's not like you have to go to the fucking, the library in the fucking 70s and look at encyclopedias. Like, we have so much information available at our fingertips for free, and you have to do the work. You have to undo the work of your trauma so that you don't pass it on to other people. And it's one of the reasons why I have not been in a relationship for 3 years, because I am on a serious fucking healing journey. And although there's only so much healing that you can do on your own, yes, you have to heal through other people, because other people will challenge you in ways that you've never thought. It doesn't have to be with just a romantic relationship. As I said before, with my previous best friend, she forced me to heal in ways that I never thought was possible. And I love her for that. It was horrible, but like, people have to deal with their shit. You cannot just go around inflicting the damage that other people have inflicted on you because you're hurt. It's not okay.
Well, and I think too, like I was gonna say, like we're very open. Like, I'm very open on my page about how fucked up I truly am. Trying to do better, but I'm very open about it. And I'm very open with the people who are in my life about it. And like, I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not. Like, I really wish this shit was easy. Like, I know a lot of people hit me up lately and they're like, "Well, how do you do it? Like, how do you keep pushing?" And I'm like, once you get to a certain point, you just do it. Like, there's really no like thinking about it anymore, and that's not the answer that most people want to hear. But the reality of it is like, you just get to a point where you just push through it. And I'm sorry, like, I don't know, like, I think one of the reasons that men will do like unhinged behavior or do things that like you call them out on, they're like, "Well, my grandma died," or "My this person died," or "I have this much trauma," or "My dad was never around." There's a quote or like a TikTok that I like watched a couple months back that I wanted to bring up for this podcast, and it was like, women will say like their villain origin story is like their dad kicked them out, like they had to like survive on the streets, or like they were like pimped out and da 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 da, all this shit, right? Like, had to survive on her own since she was 14. And men will be like, "Well, I was cheated on when I was 16 years old." And so and like it's hard, right? Because I'm never going to be one to tell you that your shit is not worth it. I have been through so fucking much, way too fucking much, to a point that, like, I mean, in high school, like, I had friends like coming to me crying about their fucking math grades, and they're like, well, how are you so smart? And I don't know how you're so smart. And I'm over here like, bitch, my dad is dying. My dad has 1% chance to live past the next year. My dad was dying since I was 16. Like, I just, sure, he was in remission and things worked out for, I don't know, 4 years, and then again, like, found him unresponsive. But the reality of it is like the shit that you're dealing with, bitch, is completely different from the shit I'm dealing with. And I had to learn very quickly the
Yes,
relativity
because
of pain and trauma. How different routes can still get you to the same end goal, even if it's not nearly to the extent of the extreme.
you know, it's interesting because there was a guy who I liked so much a year ago. He used to manage the gym that I was training at, and I was obsessed with him. I liked him so much. For what, for why, I don't know. I was just, it was like a limerence thing. But I remember like him, and his friend talking to me being like, yeah, like you don't know what he's been through with women, like he's been cheated on, blah blah blah. And I'm thinking, like, are you be so fucking for real? Like I was raped repeatedly for months. That being said, though, that is a thing, right? Is that everybody deals with and interprets things so differently. It's why you can have, you know, two siblings grow up in the same household and have the same love from parents, and one is a drug addict and one's, going to the fucking moon. Like everybody deals with and interprets situations so differently. So perfect example for someone like us who's BPD, something very small can happen, right? By comparison to someone who's, for example, neurotypical, or, doesn't have as many mental health issues. And it can be like just a blip on the radar. But for us, it's like we want to die. But what's interesting about us, I think, is we have had so much trauma and dealt with so much that it's the little things that break us, but we have the ability to cope with really big, big things so well. So, like, for example, when we feel suicidal, it's like that's just another day to us. But if I have to go to Costco and deal with the dysregulation and hearing all the carts and hearing people talk and like the beepers and like the people singing and legs shuffling and people picking things up, like that's the end of my world. But it will make me feel suicidal. And then I'll be like, well, that's a feeling that I know all too well. So it's fine.
I was going to say, I remember like, so obviously, everything that happened in April, but the ex that I'm literally talking about goes crazy for a second, just flash of unhinged. And don't get me wrong, like I said, I have a lot of love for him. Like at the end of the day, that's someone who will always be my best friend. It's someone that like has really changed who I am as a person, so I always have love for. Like literally cheated on me the night I put my dog down. And keep in mind, so remember, because remember how we had the conversation. Remember how we had the conversation at the start of this episode about like my dog being there. I got Coco in 2019 no, sorry, 2018 of October, because I knew my dad was in a nursing home at this point. So I found my dad unresponsive due to a multi-cluster stroke. Immediately called my mom from across the street. She came over, got on phone with 911. I'm doing CPR on my own father. I broke 2 of his ribs doing CPR trying to save my dad. Cops came in, they kicked us out. They drilled holes in his knees to put IVs in because he was so dehydrated. Oh my God. It was terrible. Anyways, where was I even going with this? But basically, like that happened to my dad in December, January of 2018. So in October, I was like, he's in a nursing home at like 56. Like he is not going to make it. Like he was a vegetable in a nursing home. Like didn't really know who I was. Like I remember one day, like he was like, "I have a daughter," and I was like, "That would be me," because I look a lot like my aunt. So he kept calling me Eileen, and I was like, "No, no, no, I'm your daughter." Um, and I say all this to say because for a very long time, right? I mean, I've probably been BPD for as long as I can remember, but I was my parents' keeper. My entire family didn't know about my mother's drug abuse or like physical, emotional, and mental abuse for 2 decades. They didn't find out
Fuck.
until I was 20 years old. And my dad didn't find out about my mom's addiction until I was 18, to which he said, I figured she was doing something. So I had only ever like hid secrets, taken care of my parents. The first time my dad ever went diabetic low on me, I was 6. I didn't even know how to use a phone. I couldn't even call 911. And I had to save his life. He was comatose. Like I didn't know what to do. And I was like, okay, maybe he's diabetic low. I'll feed him like sugar. So when my dad was in a nursing home, my mom had to move to Indiana. So my mom lives like 16 hours away from me. I didn't know what to do with my life. I had no purpose. My whole purpose was taking care of them and hiding their secrets. So I went to a shelter one day and I was like, I want a 20-pound dog. Well, I left with a 46-pound lab pit bull mix named Coco. And when I tell you, like, best thing that I've ever done, like my second dog overstimulates the fuck out of me, but he reminds me that I should be like, I should treat every new experience as if it's a brand new experience, right? Like he reminds me that like I should just enjoy life. But when I tell you like that dog saved my fucking life, and what is crazy is that dealt with death a lot. Like my dad passed away 9 months later, my great aunt passed away, who was like my other grandparent. And then a year and a half later, my grandma passed. So I went from like having like 12 family members to literally having like 6, like very short, very quick. Like I had other family die, but we're just not close. Neither here nor there. I say all this to say that I think for a long time, women are kind of expected to just like be the glue. I was raised in a family that was heavily women dominated. And I'll tell you right now, I mean, when my dad ended up in a nursing home, I was homeless. Like I was genuinely homeless. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what to do. I had no money. And it was my aunt and my uncle who took me in, my dad's sister who took me in. And I was raised again by like a heavily female influenced like family. It is women who really hold a lot of shit together. And I'm not saying that men can't, and I'm not saying that men aren't capable, but they don't have the tools and they were never given those tools. I'm not opposed to helping a man ever reach a point where he can understand, but I found that in my interpersonal friendships, romantic relationships, and even the relationship with my dad, they do not change and do not face that part of themselves until they are really faced with a situation that forces them to do so. And for a long time, I used to think that like I started associating pain with, or not pain, I started associating love with like change. Like if a man loves me, he will change for me. And that's kind of where I ended up in this last connection. And the reality of it is like I've given him so many tools trying to be like, hey, try this, hey, don't do that. And some of them just will never do it. And I think like, yes, it's the patriarchy biting them in the ass, but it's up to them to make that choice. You can give them tools, you can lead the horse to the water, but you can't force them to drink. And so I was gonna say, as a woman, like truly, like communicating with men, like this is the time for you to really start taking your mental health into like consideration, because I'm not discrediting what you've been through or the suffering that you've had to deal with. But I will say that a lot of us women are getting over being your free therapist and being the person that you fuck whenever you want, or the person that you coerce into sex. Like I'm so done. I've got so much to focus on. I don't. There's this song that I like, and it's actually a quote from the Internal. It's Jim Carrey movie. It's about BPD.
Yeah. The eternal sunshine of the spotless mind.
Thank you. And hi, Bubby. He broke out of the bedroom. Anyways, and there's a quote that she says, and it's basically along some. I'm not going to be able to like fully go for it, but it's basically along something in the lines like, it's like I'm already trying to figure my shit out and figure out my mental health. Don't assign me yours. It's like too many men hit me up and like whatever, but basically along the lines of like I'm already dealing with my own fucking shit and it's fucking heavy, bitch, and I'm carrying it on my shoulders. Don't go ahead and assign me yours on top of it.
Like I think that's the whole thing of this whole episode is like men's mental health is important. I think that like it was an important conversation to have. I think that because of all the shit that we've been through because of men, we're very fast to kind of discredit things. But like everybody focusing on their mental health helps. I'm glad that that guy sent me that message because I needed a perspective shift. And sometimes that's what we all need. Like, I'm not afraid to admit where I'm wrong. I'm not afraid to learn new things, and I'm not afraid to like shift and evolve as a human being. And I think that it is important that we have a men's mental health month because you're right. They do need to talk about how they feel. And most importantly, they need to, as we said, like, you know, it is a system that they built. It is the patriarchy. And most importantly, they need to talk about how they feel with one another.
I think too, like truly, if you're a man listening and there's anything you can take, it's start relying on your friends, and if you can't, they're not your friends. And to women, like truly focus on yourself, because I think a lot of us are reaching this point where like you don't need to live a life with a man, and like for a long time, generations in the past have fucked us over by putting up with their bullshit excuses and. I'm sorry, like your grandma dying 6 years ago does not
No,
equate to you cheating on
no.
me. Sorry. Like, no. But I think too, it's about women holding other women accountable, like holding women accountable to not being the emotional breeding ground for their emotional intelligence, and holding their partners who are men accountable for like, hey, like I love you and I'm here to help you and support you, but I'm not here to hold your fucking
Yeah,
hand and teach you how to heal. Because the reality of it is
yeah.
we all go through similar shit, every last one of us. And at the end of the day, whether you're a man or woman, whether society is, built to help you or oppress you, we're all fucking struggling.
That was a fucking episode, bitch. Wow.
I was very, I'm not gonna lie, very scared because again, misandrist. I was like, I'm gonna get canceled so quick.
I've made a lifetime of mistakes, you know, but, and I make mistakes constantly now. But and I'm not afraid of my mistakes to a degree, like getting exposed because I own what I've done. But more importantly than just sitting here and apologizing for wrongdoings, I've made the effort to become a different person. For example, like I'm gonna say this, and then we'll wrap it up. You know, I was a very different person when I was on drugs. I stole a lot to feed my habit. I stole from people. Mostly I stole from my mom. And like, there are so many things that I've done wrong. I can sit here and apologize all fucking day. You know, it's like people who get canceled, right? Like they can sit here and apologize all day, but there's a difference between you sitting and apologizing because you feel like it's something you have to do, or doing something and realizing, wow, that was wrong, and figuring out how to do better and be better and educate yourself. So, men's mental health, glad that we're having about it. Not that's not a word, that's not a sentence. Men's mental health month, glad that it's happening. Glad that we're talking about it. Glad that I had a personal perspective shift. And talk to your friends. If you can't talk to your friends, find new fucking friends. And that's on the fucking fifth episode of the Anti-Filter podcast, bitch. If you are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, take 20 seconds, give us a 5-star rating. If you're listening on YouTube, hit that like button, smash that subscribe button, comment. And if you hated the podcast, send it to someone you also hate in order to spite them.
Exactly. But
I
like,
mean,
how could
if
you?
you're at like if you're listening for an hour, odds are you don't hear it. Odds are you don't.
Odds are you
Odds are
don't.
you don't. And that's it. And that's that. And thank you guys so much for listening. We'll see you next week. Bye.